All right, hello everyone. My name is Brendan Pugh, and welcome to Writing Quest. Today we have with us a UK-based author. Her name is Rachel Tilley, and I want to welcome you to the show. And how are you doing today?
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a very we've had quite a few storms here recently, so today it's not a nice sunny day. So I'm kind of glad for that. Yeah,
Just a bit cloudy here. We sort of had a week of sun and then it's gone a bit grey, but
yeah.
it's still quite a nice temperature.
Yeah, we just had a kind of a big round of tornadoes the last couple of days, so it's been pretty crazy. So I'm glad for a nice calm day. So, well, why don't you just give us some of your background and kind of talk us through how you got started? Maybe go into we'll kind of maybe get into some of the publishing stuff later, but like what kind of got you into writing and where did you get started and all that kind of stuff?
Sure. I have two books out so far. They both took me around 4 years each to write. Um, I hoping to speed up a little bit after that, but yeah, these ones were both. I think 4 years is probably quite normal for a first book actually, and then yeah, my second was the same, and that's just been released a week ago. um, what got me into writing? I think I guess I read a lot all through school. I love reading, and I read a lot of fantasy now. I did read. I think I read kind of anything and everything at school. Started with things like The Secret History and Wilbur Smith and some historical fiction. I loved Greek mythology. And then I read Lord of the Rings, sat down and couldn't put it down for an entire weekend, and then went from there. But I guess I was trying to think about this earlier. Why did I get into writing? Because I feel like it kind of happened. But when I was I'm not sure what stage of school you call it over there, but it's like age 7 to 11. We
Hmm.
had this writing competition every year, and what would happen is one day a year, the teachers would just say, "Here's a theme for a story. You have an hour and a half to write a story on this theme." And I used to love that day, and I just really enjoyed it. And there's so we had it was 4 years, and there were two classes in each year. And for the first 3 years, so age 7, 8, 9, the same two people won it from my year every time. And then in the fourth year, they announced that my class was the winner, and everyone expected it to be the same person. And then they said my name, and I think I was so surprised that I hit my head on the wall behind me, because obviously we're now the oldest people in the school. We've got the nice back row of the auditorium, and I was just so shocked. But it just, for some reason, meant more to me than a lot of other stuff that I've been involved in all through school. So I guess that kind of spark passion for writing has always been there. And it just developed from there. But it did take me, quite a while after that to come up with a story that I actually felt was worth writing into a book, because you know it's hard to have an idea, and you have to have something that you feel really passionate about. And then I guess one day the idea was there, and I was thinking, this is the one. I know how it starts and how it ends. I've just got to get
Yeah,
it from A to B.
yeah,
Really.
yeah. Yeah, it's simple. It's so simple. Just get the story from point A to point B. Yeah, yeah. I think there's it's so interesting those times. That time is such a formative time for so many people. Where so my daughter is 9 and she is in dance, and so the first time she's did really well at a competition or did really well in something, it's like it kind of makes you it solidifies it for you. You won this writing thing and you were so shocked that you wanted to do it, but then you actually won it, and it's like this solidifying moment for you to like, this is what I want to do. That's really cool. I also was laughing about the reason I laughed at the Lord of the Rings. I've yet to talk to one person yet who hasn't said, well, then I read the Lord of the Rings and that changed everything. And I think that seems to be a very common theme for people, for sure.
Yeah, there's something about it, and I still when I'm writing, I like that kind of quest type story in fantasy. I like it to be on the adventure side of the genre. So they're going on some sort of adventure, where they're going to end up, and sort of one of the things that I'm not really a planner. But one of the things that I'll probably know at the outset is what locations I want to happen in the story. So they're going to go from this place to this place, and then this is going to happen at this place, um, because I want it to feel like the reader's going with you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and what's interesting about I actually just recently restarted reading Lord of the Rings. I haven't actually read it for a couple of years, and so I thought I'd give it another go. And I it's so interesting in those adventure stories, but particularly in that where he doesn't revisit, like he'll they go on the adventure, but there's actually quite a few times he doesn't go back and revisit things. You know, like Tom Bombadil, like he never comes back up again. He's just in that one spot. Or in The Hobbit, like they just keep hitting all these locations and they never go back to it. It's just they pass through it and then that's over. I think that's a pretty interesting feature of those adventure quest type stories.
Yeah, Tom Bombadil, obviously the controversial character. I remember
Hmm.
the first time I read it, maybe, I don't know, it was like 10 or 11, thinking this bit's really boring, I need to get through it, and then loving the rest of it. But then I reread it not that long ago, and I enjoyed the Tom Bombadil bit a lot more this time.
Hmm. Yeah, it
Um,
definitely changes. I'm the same. So I actually didn't get into it until I saw the movie when it came out, and I would have been, I don't know, I think it was like 10 or something like that. And then immediately got the other two and read those voraciously. And then when I went back to read Fellowship, I couldn't even get through that part because I just didn't like it at all. And now though, I'm like, I see what it is, and as being older, I'm like, oh, this, I get it now. It's cooler to me now, I suppose.
mm.
Yeah. So, so that's kind of your background. So this is for the particular story you came up with, you said it kind of came to you. I feel like that happens to a lot of people where it's just like you're trying to decide what I feel like it doesn't ever come from uh you pre-plan it. I feel like it always hits you where you're like, this is a story, and then it actually kind of works in your head, and then you're like, this is the one I should pursue. So you kind of talked about that. How did that process go? So once you kind of heard about like this is the thing that I want to write, where did you go from there with that?
So I usually plan a little bit out in my head. So I mean, I can't draw, but I'll sketch out a map. I'd love to be able to put the maps into my books. I haven't quite got there yet, but um, I'll sketch out a map for myself, and I will um, get get where the ending is. Quite often, the characters will come slightly differently. So I'll have the idea of the story. That one, yeah, it does just pop into my head. But then the characters will come from dreams, which I'm assuming is the other common way that people come up with
Mhm.
ideas. So I'll get quite a lot of a feeling of their personality from there. And then I don't. I'm not good at like plotting. I've tried plotting books and then they fall by the wayside. So for me, it's I have to get the beginning down once it's in my head. The ending, I write in a very linear way, so I have to get to the end before I write the ending. But as I go, I'll write bullet points at the bottom of my. I use Word, so at the bottom of my Word document, I'll have like 10 bullet points, and that'll grow to kind of 30 bullet points as I go. And those bullet points are not necessarily this is going to happen in the plot. It'll be just completely random things like what if they said this line of dialogue at some point in the story, or it might be have you thought about this, and they'll all be just completely muddled and not in any kind of logic, and as I go through the story I'll fit them in where they go, but I don't tend to outline. Well, I have it in my head, which is not the
Mhm.
best way of doing it, but it's just what works for me.
So you don't even necessarily know what the ending is. You just kind of start at the beginning and maybe have a slight idea, but nothing really concrete.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think I could write a book if I didn't know what was going to happen at the end.
Hmm.
Like, it's not necessarily this is the end scene, but it's this is the resolution of that character's journey. I will know because I feel like I have to know where they're going to end up, or that otherwise my book would just have no form at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what I've been hearing from a lot of people is whether they are super big into outlining or whether they just kind of do what you do, where you just write it as you go, they still always kind of have that like, I know the beginning and I know kind of at least a general idea of the ending to, and I think that helps have a little more direction and where you need to go and stuff. But that's yeah, I like that idea of, and I do that kind of too, where I have all these notes. I'm like, I don't really know where this fits, but maybe at some point it'll just work wherever I am in the story.
I have a bit of a running joke with a couple of members of my family because all of my stories. So I also write some short stories as well, but my novels, everything has tunnels in it. Um,
Hmm.
Not literally everything, but like 89% of what I write seems
Yeah,
to have some sort of scene where they're underground and they're walking through tunnels. I don't know why. It's just one of my favorite things to write.
yeah,
So that's going to be built into a story. So there's going to be something that makes that fit.
yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I think everyone's got a little thing like that where, like mine, everything I come up with, mostly everything of mine is kind of in its own series. I don't really have anything outside of it, but it's very like Tolkien, like high fantasy. It just elves and dwarves and like I just like that stuff and that so I think it's definitely can't be afraid of that. Like, hey, if that's what you like, then put it in there. Yeah. So is there any and we can get into some specifics of your new book here in a second, but is there any like um with this, so are your books kind of in a series? Well, maybe start there. Do you have any in a series or are they all kind of standalones?
At the moment, I've got two books. So that I've got one short story that I released on my own, which is like a comedy sci-fi and completely different genre to everything else. And then I've got two fantasy books, which are kind of epic, slightly young adult, but maybe slightly more epic with a little bit. The recent one's a little bit dark fantasy, both standalone. And I've also got two novels in progress, also currently both standalone. I think everything would suit a series. It's just I write quite. I tend to put quite a lot of plot into a short space of words.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
so, so they do have a full story arc in each of them, and they're not related or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's I like that. I think we live in a world right now where everyone is so obsessed with the sequels and the remakes and the like having a big old series that is super connected and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of like that approach of like, nope, this is just its own story and it can live on its own and then there's another story and yeah, that's pretty cool. Is there any reason you think you tend to go that way or it just happens to be that way?
I think it's just the way I write. I think it's just that, I come up with a story and it feels like one book to me, and then I write it into one book. I'd love to write a series at some point as well, but I just seem to enjoy doing the standalones, so that's what I go with.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. So, alongside your, so we kind of established that you're not really an outliner. You're more of a just kind of go for it, see where it takes you. Do you have any kind of specific routines around that, or like kind of writing rituals, or like do you always sit in the same spot in the house with a cup of coffee, or that kind of thing?
I mean, the coffee, yeah.
Well,
Um, But no, I mean, I sometimes sit on the sofa. I sometimes sit at the dining table. I'm upstairs at the moment. This isn't somewhere I normally sit, but change of scenery. It's quieter up here. So it's just turn my laptop on and then try and. I mean, the big thing you try and avoid is the procrastination, and obviously, opening your document to start work is the thing. It used to be that I'd kind of give myself 10-15 minutes to get into the writing and settle in and maybe check social media and things before actually starting, but nowadays it's grab the 20 minutes when you can, and you have to be quite disciplined about it, and they do really add up, those little bits of 20 minutes in your lunch break or something. What I do is convert my um, what I'm working on at the moment into an ebook, send it to my phone, and then do editing over lunch when I'm in the office as well now,
Mhm.
which actually actually quite enjoying. And I found that the more I write, the more I enjoy the editing side as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely a thing is that procrastination and distraction of like we have so much going on and I don't know about you, but I'm married, I have a young daughter and got a job and there's all sorts of those pressures and stuff and everything happening and so it is actually quite amazing what you can accomplish in like a 20-minute writing session that you just I have 20 minutes right now in this random time. And so I'm just going to try to write something really fast. And if you have that kind of pressure, you can actually get something pretty cool done. Yeah. I've been kind of leaning a lot more recently. I've been handwriting more in notebooks. Um, it's slower, but it helps with that distraction, because I don't have my phone or, if I put my phone in the other room and I just grab a notebook, I'm feeling a little more productive because every time my job is all on computers. So everything I do is on a computer. So the kind of the moment I like get on a computer, it's like it's just so much distraction that it's hard for me to like just sit and do the writing.
Yeah, I sometimes do. I mean, I felt like that today at lunch. I just thought I don't want to look at my computer for a little bit, so
Hmm.
I didn't. I didn't do anything. But sometimes you just do, you don't. And I carry these like tiny notebooks around with me when I go out. But and sometimes I'll write a chapter in them, and then maybe I won't look at it for 2 or 3 months, and then I'll pick it up again. But I'm not very disciplined about using a notebook. But I do enjoy writing that way as well. It's one of those things where it's a hobby, so you have to do what works for you and how you feel.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's definitely just kind of a. I feel like when I first started doing writing, I was better about having better routines about it, and then as life has progressed, I've just kind of like well, we'll just write this note in my phone there and write this in a notebook there. And like it's gotten a little more fragmented, but I'm trying to pull that back together. So it's less like that.
Yeah, I send myself text messages all the time,
Yeah.
and sometimes I understand what they mean afterwards.
Yeah.
But
I
it'll be a
right.
line of dialogue or something.
I text my brother a lot. I'll just text him something and be like, "Hey, I'm just sending this to you because I need to say it out loud." And then he'll tell me like that's really dumb, or he'll say that's really cool. Like get his little commentary on the idea. But yeah, I do that a lot too. Do you so as we're kind of talking about that too, how do you fight some of that distraction and how do you kind of stay disciplined as you're working through like, you're working on your next project or whatever it is? Do you kind of do you give yourself deadlines? Do you just have it in your head like I'd love to have this done in a year or two? Do like what's your kind of process around that, I suppose?
Um, so I do I do work quite well with deadlines. And when I was writing short stories, which incidentally would recommend to anybody who's writing a novel to get some practice writing short stories, they've taught me so much about how to write and how to structure things, and you get to experiment with all different genres and things. And with those, you usually have like a deadline. So if you're working to a specific anthology core, you'll have a deadline for that. So that sort of helped me to complete the projects for that. With the novels, obviously, the 4 year thing include for both of them has included maybe a year or two of break in the middle where I put it down and then picked it up again later. So probably do find it a little bit difficult to keep going with things. Life gets in the way sometimes. With my latest book, in the end, what I did was put it up for pre-order. So about 6, 7 weeks ago, I just went, okay, this is the date it's going to come out. And at that point, it had been through 4 or 5 rounds of edits. I'd had the comments back from my editor, and they'd already gone into the book. So all I had to do was a final read through. Actually, what I ended up doing was 2 final read throughs. But having the deadline, it really spurred me on to get through it, and I was spending a lot more time and I was a lot more focused on making sure I got it done. But I probably wouldn't do that to myself unless I knew the book was definitely ready to go out. Even like worst case scenario, it was going to be a finished product. And I mean, in this case, it was like two final read throughs to go through. So, um, yeah, I have that point where I'm sort of meandering on things, and I have got one novel that's fully completed at the moment that I just need to put the beta read feedback through before I then book an editing slot. But I've picked up a different work in progress instead. But I think that I'm more in the mood for it. They're very different subgenres of fantasy, so I'm just going with what I feel more invested in at the moment. So I'm still making progress. Hopefully, get there
Yeah.
with both of them.
Yeah, that's a little risky. I mean, obviously you had it mostly done, but like that's a good way to like, hey, it's got to be out in this next 6 weeks or something. Um, but again, I would agree with you, like making sure you're mostly there of like, it's I know I can get it done. I just got to do a little bit of stuff, but I think that's a great way to keep yourself motivated for sure.
Yeah,
So
it helped.
yeah, for your self-publishing, we can get into that a little bit. So you mentioned having some beta readers, editor, kind of walk through that process. Like, how did you, once you kind of decided like this book, I want to publish this book with your first one, how did you go about finding those people? Did you have a group? Did you pay for a group? That kind of process.
So with my first book, I was completely outside of the writing world. I didn't have any kind of. I think I probably had Facebook, and that was it. No social media. Didn't really know what I was doing. I just knew that I had a book, and I I'm trying to think. I think I even made my own cover originally, and just went right. I'm just going to put it out there, and then obviously it was out there, and maybe like one person reviewed it in the first year, and then I got a bit more serious about things, and went back over it, released a new edition with a new cover, and went back over the editing for that because it was just I just didn't have a clue. With my second one, obviously, I had started it, and then I think getting into the short story world introduced me to lots of different people who did have the experience. So the editor is someone I met through so some of the publishers have like Facebook groups, and then people talk in the Facebook groups, and she actually picked up my first book and read it, and we got talking, and then she agreed to edit my new one. And because she'd already read my first one, I knew exactly what I was getting into, and that it would be a really good fit for me. So I say that was probably quite lucky, but then I guess it just shows you that being part of the world and just immersing yourself a little bit in, even if, I mean, a lot of people hate putting themselves out there on social media, but just actually being on there and seeing what people are talking about and getting to know just a few people around it makes such a big difference when it comes to actually like putting your book out there. And I know so much more this time around than I did the first time, and I absolutely love the story that I put out the first time, and I love where it is now. But when I first was at that point, and I just didn't know from I didn't have as much experience writing, and it was edited as well as I think it could have been at the time. But now I look back and I know so much more from. I think the short stories thing really does help, and I would really recommend it. And the other thing is it gets you used to having rejections as well, because you're sending your stories off to places, and it's great. Like you're probably going to have some of them accepted, some of them rejected, and you just get used to submitting things. Whereas with a novel, if you're going to send it out to people, that's something you've put for years of time into. Um, a rejection is probably hits a bit harder than it does with the short story. And now, yeah, I decided not to query this time around, and I went straight to self-publishing just because I'd had a good experience. Despite me saying, I didn't know what I was doing, I had a really good experience with self-publishing the first time. So I just wanted to do it again, and I love the control it gives you, the visibility it gives you. It feels like it's my book. I think there's a lot of positives to both self-publishing and traditional publishing. So for me, self-publishing was the right way to go. But it's just great that we have these options now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are really this self-publishing thing is people really like being in control of their stuff and being in control of their creativity. And I think we there's just so many avenues now to get out there where before, even 10 years ago, it was just so much harder to do. And so I think that's really cool that I think a lot of people are like that. I think they're like, hey, I can, a lot of musicians are like that. Like, I don't need to go get a label. I can put out my music on my own and make it. And so I think that's just really, it's such a cool thing about the time that we're in now.
Yeah, and I mean, I got to pick my editor, and I knew it was someone I'd connect well with. I've had a lot of positive feedback on the cover, which, I mean, the only thing I did was choose the cover, and the cover designer, but I got to have that choice. And yeah, I mean, I obviously love my cover, but I was really surprised how nice everyone's been about it. Like it really has had a positive feedback, and I think it's incredible how much people do notice these things. And obviously, if you go traditional publishing, I've seen some really good covers that way as well. And um, it's I just think it's great that there's so many more because of I think because of the self-publishing options, there's more people going into the business, and then there's more choice as well. So it's just increased the quality of everything.
Yeah. Well, I like what you said too about reaching out to people and getting into the space. And I think that would be so I've been doing this YouTube channel now for 3.5 years or so. And I was just making videos about whatever. And I just in this last year was like, man, I'd really like to start doing more of a podcast and talking with people who are doing this and all that. And it's amazing what happens when you just start reaching out to people. Like I just saw you on Twitter or X and thought I'd reach out. And, like you said, like once you kind of got into the world of it, there's just so many people that are willing to be a part of it and help and talk. And, it's just really cool to it's amazing. I think that'd be what my advice would be for anyone is like just ask people, you know. You'd be surprised at what can happen if you just start talking to people. Oh, the editing process.
Mm.
So was that because it is something like so you work on it for years and then you have kind of that attachment and then you get some rejections. Is the editing process kind of tough? Like to hand them you know, basically your child and be like, please be nice to this.
Um, I I think it's not as tough as probably querying is. I guess a lot of it is grammatical. Have I put my commas in the right place? And sometimes when I get the edits back, I'm like, oh shoot, I knew that one. And the plot type stuff, because she does developmental editing as well, um, is really helpful, and that's what you learn from. And so actually, I always feel like, well, that's a relief that I've seen that before it's gone out. So it's usually things like this scene needs to be a bit longer, or can you look at the tension in this scene? But not anything. I guess you can kind of tell when you're writing if it works or not. So um, I've had other works that I've thought actually this isn't this isn't viable. So you set it aside and think it's not going to work. But if you've written it and it works, I don't think the editing process is that scary. I mean, obviously, when you open it, you're thinking, "Oh God, what's he going to say?" Um, but I think I like the fact that it makes me a better writer, and it's quite satisfying to see. Look, that's what I could have thought about, or that's someone else's perspective, and it is helpful.
Yeah, I think one thing for me that's always tough is like I'll write it and it makes sense to me, but I know what I'm trying to say, and then I'll give it to someone and they'll be like, "This doesn't make any sense. I don't understand what you're saying at all." I think that's where one of the biggest benefits of doing that, especially that developmental edit of like, is what I'm trying to say actually coming across?
Yeah, I think I've definitely been there where I think I've taught myself now to add in like a bit of extra context and sort of it feels like you're over explaining when you're writing, but you're really not, because the reader's not inside your head, so they don't know that you've thought this thought 50 times before. They're only hearing it for the first or second time.
Hmm.
So yeah, that is definitely something that I've had to, like, you like get used to how much information you put in and how you phrase your language.
Yeah, and use the same editor then for developmental editing and for like line editing, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was just talked to someone not too long ago that they used different people for those things, and they went to someone who was like just the developmental editor, and then they went to someone who was the line editor.
Yeah, I think that's possibly the more normal way to do it, but I just knew Charlotte was good at was good at both, so I
Yeah,
guess kind of hit jackpot there. Yeah, um, she's pretty amazing. So
I think it'd be hard to if you were an as an editor, it'd be hard not to become good at the developmental editing too, because you're reading so many stories. You you just kind of naturally have to learn about that kind of stuff, you know?
yeah, I mean, I try and do so. I do beta reads for, is it beta reads? That's how you say it.
Yeah.
Beta reads for people. Sometimes, and I try and look at a little bit of grammar and as well as plot and things. But obviously not not qualified, but just in the sense that it gives a different perspective of people. But I think you do naturally look at both, but I guess it just depends on what editing courses you've done. And I'm going to stop talking because I don't know enough about it. But um, I think it is true that you do look at everything anyway naturally when you're reading it from that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, is there any other, so you go through that process. Is there anything else in that sub self-publishing pathway that like people should be thinking about, or like something that maybe surprised you, like when you started the process of going through the editing process and you're going to launch the book? Like, is there anything where you were like, oh, that's harder than I thought, or something you didn't think about that you had to do, or anything like that?
I guess a lot of people ask about formatting their books. A lot of people say, I don't know how to format a book, I don't know how to get it onto Amazon. And that bit is actually is a lot simpler than what you expect. The tool is a little bit clunky, um, but it actually just, if you've not got pictures or anything, obviously for non-fiction it can be different, but um, if you've got your plain manuscript and your chapters and you upload it and it gives you all the pages that you need to add on at the beginning and the end, and um, you put it, and then it gives you a file that you upload on Amazon. So it's actually a lot easier than you would think it was. I guess things that surprise me, I think it's just a journey rather than a specific, like, oh, that's the thing. It's more just, as you go through it, you learn a lot of things that you didn't really realize you were going to. And everyone has that, oh my god, marketing, how do I do this, what am I
Hmm.
doing, how do I sell my book moments. And I guess, I see a lot of people saying, how do I get reviews on my book? But I think it's one of those things where, every author is going through that process. And you see even like big name authors are still there marketing their books on Twitter or Instagram or wherever. It's just one of those things that you have to get past that sort of, oh, this is awkward, and think, right, look, here's my book.
Hmm. I think too, it's the we're so we tend to be so like it's going to be this very linear process. Like I'm going to do this and then it's going to go here and it's going to be just this perfect little path that we walk, and it never is. And so I think it's just kind of that learning to just take it as it happens. Like you just figure it out as you go, and you don't have to know everything about marketing to jump into marketing your book, and you just kind of learn stuff as you go and just being open to those things.
Yeah, I mean, learning to use Canva has been it's been interesting, but I quite enjoy. It's quite nice to have a break from writing and create something on Canva that I may just put straight into the bin, or I might then go and share. So I mean, there's definitely a lot of a lot of products out there that help with these things.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot out there now that can really there's so many tools out there. It's almost hard to find the right tools because there's so many. Um, but so books out, how do you of course not everyone likes everything that you do. So how do you deal with both the good and the bad from like ratings and reviews and like have you ever as a creative how do you kind of deal with some of that you put your book out there and you get 10 5 stars but then maybe you get the one star. How do you kind of work through that and deal with some of that stuff?
I mean, I think the first time you get a negative review, so I had a 1 star review quite early on with my first book, and I think it's the first time you get it is the hardest. And I guess I just took maybe a day to myself where I just thought, I don't really feel like writing today, maybe too much, and I'm just not going to think about it. And at some point, I'll feel motivated again and inspired. Like you just you just have to work through and think, okay, that's fine. That person didn't like it, and I think other than that first one, which I think that the first one probably does hit you a little bit, but because I know that I've had that, and it doesn't bother me as much now. I mean, obviously, um, I want people to be out there reading it, and I'd rather people didn't force themselves to read it if they're not enjoying it. But people should, if they want to review a book, should give what they honestly think. And um, I think my books probably there's people that will enjoy them more than other people who necessarily wouldn't. Like it depends on what your reading tastes are, and yeah, I think you just have to accept that it's part. If you're putting yourself out there, and it's hard to put yourself out there and say, look, here's something. You are opening yourself up for criticism, and I you're never going to cheer a 1 star review, but I think it's all about balance and just remembering, look, I've got 1 star review, I've got 5 star reviews. Some people love it, some people don't. It's a fact of writing, and you you learn to kind of accept that you, as long as you don't take it personally. I think that's the important thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think it's with any creative if you make anything creative, it's hard to not be attached to it. And then if you get that bad review, you just it hits you a minute. But I think a lot of people I would hate for that to stop people because I think that's what happens is they kind of put themselves out there, they get maybe a bad review, and then they just say, nope, I'm not doing it anymore. But I think there's so many, like you said, I think there's so many more people out there who will like it and want to support it other than the people who won't. And so it's worth continuing to follow that and put yourself out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still things to learn about how you make sure it gets to the right audience, because the people that are going to enjoy the book are the people that want the right genre, the right kind of themes in the book, and trying to make sure that you've got the right cover and the right marketing and the right blurb is a learning curve for anybody. So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. There's a lot to balance there too. There's a lot of like again, I learned this like doing YouTube. It's like you make a YouTube thumbnail and you make a video and the title and the thumbnail and the topic and like sometimes this doesn't work. And that's the like how with you're balancing a lot of creative elements. They might look at your book cover and love it and pick it up. They might look at it and say, yeah, not for me. And you just can't please everyone. You just got to make what you want to make and go for it.
Very true.
Yeah. So, kind of branching off of that, so we talked about self-publishing, but I think you mentioned that you had done some querying. Um, so maybe a little bit, do you know about what that was like for you? And then maybe why you decided not to do that anymore, or
I think with my first book, I did send a couple of queries, but as I say, I'm sure my query letters were not. Now, when I see people writing query letters, they're all structured according to a format, and I just try to follow based on the guidance on the website, which is not the way to do it. Like, it has to
Mhm.
be polished and it has to be marketable, and I didn't really put that much energy into it because I didn't necessarily think that was the right way for my book anyway. I guess probably the places where I would say I've had acceptances and rejections are more short story type world, and it's actually quite interesting because you're more likely to get well, I say more likely from what I've seen. I think you're probably more likely to get the odd personal feedback through short stories as well, or at least have more contact with more editors or publishers that way. So it's just taught me a lot about how you communicate with other people in the industry, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's I've heard a lot of all sorts of stories about querying, about people having good experiences, people having bad experiences, how you write the letters, and yeah, it seems like a whole kind of it seems like a lot, and that's I can see why people would be like, no, I'm just going to self-publish it. That seems like really hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, with my second book, it was more a choice of having the control over being able to see. So, like, I can control the price. I
Mhm.
could control that it came to market now instead of waiting a bit longer. And so, the things that are important to me worked best with self publishing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So as we kind of start to wrap up, do you have any kind of final thoughts or advice, or for anyone who's wanting to maybe get into this or to self-publish their own work? Do you have anything that you'd want to like tell someone who's a little unsure or not, doesn't know what they're going to do or how to do it?
I think I would say talk to people, find people that can um, give you their experiences, and don't take everything literally. You have to balance up whether it makes sense to you as well. But I know I'm usually happy to talk to people and say, oh, this was my experience, and people contact me. So there are people out there um, who who can tell you, oh, this is why I did, don't do this, or do this, or use this formatting tool. You just have to um, kind of get back to that, immersing yourself in the community. um, I think it is helpful to sort of get a bit of a feel for things first, so that you can see how other people are doing things, and know what good looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, and doing just your research on other authors and what they've put out and what their covers look like, and just kind of like you said, just talking to people. It's amazing what happens when we just talk to each other, you know? Yeah,
Exactly.
very cool. Well, this has been super fun. I'm glad that you agreed to talk to me. And so tell us where we find all of your stuff. So your books, and you have a website, social media, all that kind of stuff.
So I'm on Twitter, which is at Rachel L Tilley, and Instagram Threads is at Rachel underscore L underscore Tilley, I think. Um, and then yeah, my books are on Amazon. So saw one of your videos and someone had their book, so I bought mine.
Yeah, yeah, cool.
This is my first book, The Locket,
Awesome,
and this is my new one. So exciting, that came out last week. Upon the
awesome.
Darkest Mark. I can't even say my book name. Upon the Darkest Mountain. Um,
That cover is really cool. I got it pulled up here, and that's really great. Do you know who the artist was that did that, or did you how'd you put it together?
so yeah, so I didn't do the cover. I found the cover designer. She actually, the same person did both of mine. Cat cover design.
Yeah,
Um,
it
so
it's
yeah,
really great.
I've been messaging her saying everybody loves the cover.
Yeah, it's really cool. That was the first thing when I pulled it up. I was like, oh wow, that cover's really great.
Yeah, I made sure to put a dedication to her and my editor on like literally the first page, because that's like, you guys have done great.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, and thanks for watching this episode of Writing Quest. We'll put all that stuff down in the description, and everything, so people can find you and click on your links and all that kind of stuff. So, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Writing Quest.